Hello, this is my presentation project over my poster that I made for the class for my study that I did. I had to hand make my poster because it's really hard to do the presentation on the iPad. But I still covered all the materials that I need to cover. So this is about my study that I did on the differences of the mental health of first-generation students versus legacy students. My hypothesis was that there would be a significant difference. So my null hypothesis is that there would be no significant difference in the mental health status of first-generation students versus legacy college students. As you can see right here, on my introduction, it says college students are known to have an abundant amount of stress that brings an impact to their mental health. There is a gap of knowledge of how college affects the mental health of first-generation students versus legacy students. Being a first-generation student has its own unique stressors. Unlike legacy students, first-generation students don't have parents who have been to college. First-generation students are in the dark when it comes to anything to do with the college system. So I believe this introduction is the reason why I wanted to do this study, because I believe that first generation students have more unique struggles than other college students, especially legacy students. The present study, my goal was to evaluate first generation students if they have a poor mental health status compared to legacy students who I would assume have a good mental health status. My method was giving out a survey. I had 13 participants that were male and female, and the design and procedure was that participants responded to an online survey. They answered a few questions about themselves, and then they answered the 10 questions from the Rosenberg self-esteem quiz to evaluate their self-esteem, because this is also a way that people are evaluated to determine their mental health status as well. So I thought this would be a good way to determine the mental health status of these college students. And it was on a Likert 7-point scale. So from strongly disagree to strongly agree, 4 being neutral. And then my results, I put that my results were that first generation students, the mean of their self-esteem was 4.52. The standard deviation was 0.296. The standard error was 0.12. The number of people in that one was 6, and then the degrees of freedom was 5. And then for legacy students, the mean was 4.20. The standard deviation was 0.47. The standard error was 0.18. That one had 7 participants, with the degrees of freedom being 6. There was a total of 13 participants, 4 males and 9 females. Among the participants, 6 were first generation students and 7 were legacy students. And then I went ahead and made like the charts that I made. That was about the only thing I could do on Excel, was make those charts. So this is the first chart that I made. It's just basically the legacy students versus the first generation students. So it says down here legacy or first gen, and then on the side it's what score they received. So it goes all the way up to a 6, but the highest score was a 4.1, I believe. Not a 4.1, a 5.1, with the lowest scores being a 3.8. And then I also made another one based on male and female. There wasn't a significant difference between the male and females. There were significantly less males than females. But if you look, these 3 are males right here. And one of them had one of the lowest scores that you could get, that the other participants got almost a lowest score. And then 2 of the males had pretty high scores. But when you compare it to the overall of the females, it pretty much evens out. That's why I wanted to also compare the male and females. So my conclusion was that the results did not have a significant, were statistically significant, because the difference, the mean difference between legacy students and first generation students was extremely close. I believe this is because I did not have that many participants, and also I didn't have that many males and females. I feel like there should be an even male and females, even though I know that the majority of college students are females, just based on other studies. So although that my study was kind of a fail, I still believe that it's important to study first generation students compared to the rest of college students, because first generation students have a number of unique factors that will affect their mental health differently than those of legacy students. And although legacy students do have their own struggles, like own unique struggles, I just think that first generation students have more unique struggles. And although there is a lot of support for first generation students in college, most of that support mainly stems from like clubs, or specifically if you're a first generation student, maybe you're more likely to get one or the other scholarship. But I think what needs to be highlighted in college is that all students are struggling with their mental health, and that should be a significant part of your studies, to focus on your mental health and to understand your mental health. Because I asked a series of 5 questions just based on this, and the people who answered that they had, the people that answered the questions that they strongly agreed that they had those unique situations happen to them were more likely to have a lower mental health status. So although this study failed, I do believe that if the study was done again over a long period of time, that it would show that first generation students have lower mental health status than legacy students, just because of the lack of resources that they have compared to those of legacy students. Okay, and then I have my little reference section right there, and I did write the references in there. Okay, thank you.